Hello, students. You're welcome in this lecture. We will explore cases related to the fundamental rights. The Indian Constitution enshrines fundamental rights as the bedrock of democracy and justice. These rights are not merely legal entitlements but moral commitments ensuring dignity, liberty, and equality. The Supreme Court has, through a series of landmark cases, interpreted and strengthened these rights, shaping the essence of Indian constitutionalism. Article 14 stands at the core, guaranteeing equality before law and equal protection of laws. The court in Keshwanand Bharti case versus Keshwanand Bharti versus State of Kerala, 1973, discussed equality as part of the constitution's basic structure, emphasizing that law must be just, fair, and non-arbitrary. The decision clarified that legislative or executive action cannot violate equality principles. This judicial stance was expanded in E.P. Rayappa versus State of Tamil Nadu in 1974, where arbitrariness was held as the antithesis of equality. The court ruled that administrative decisions must be free from bias and discrimination. In Indra Sohani versus Union of India, 1992, the court addressed reservation policy, validating affirmative action for OBCs while capping it at 50%. The verdict balanced social justice with merit based equality. Similarly, M.C. Mehta versus State of Tamil Nadu, 1996, linked Article 14 to environmental justice, declaring that equality includes a clean and safe environment, an essential condition for human dignity and fairness. Article 14 of the Indian Constitution ensures that the state treats all individuals equally in similar circumstances. The Supreme Court has developed the doctrine that equality is not mere uniformity but the absence of arbitrariness. In E.P. Rappa versus State of Tamil Nadu in 1974, Justice Bhagwati observed that arbitrariness and equality are enemies. If one exists, the other cannot. This principle revolutionized the administrative law by expanding the meaning of equality. The court insisted that every executive or legislative act must be based on reason and public interest. In R.D. Shetty versus International Airport Authority of India, 1979, equality was further applied to public employment, ensuring that government contracts and recruitments must follow transparent, fair, and non-discriminatory processes. Later, Indra Swani versus Union of India clarified that reservations are constitutionally valid tools to promote social justice, yet they cannot exceed 50% or rest solely on caste. Equality thus evolved into a dynamic concept, embarrassing fairness, justice, and non arbitrariness. The judiciary's interpretation of Article 14 shows that equality is a living principle. It demands constant judicial vigilance against arbitrary governance and promotes inclusivity as a constitutional value. Article 15 prohibits discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. It also empowers the state to take special measures for disadvantaged groups. The landmark case, State of Kerala versus N.M. Thomas, 1976, interpreted Article 15(4) as an enabling provision for social justice. The court emphasized that reservations and affirmative action should not perpetuate caste identities but uplift socially and educationally backward communities. The judgment recognized that true equality requires the removal of historical disadvantages. Article 15 reflects the spirit of positive discrimination, treating unequals differently to ensure substantive equality. It guarantees that all citizens enjoy equal access to public spaces, education, and employment opportunities. The principle extends to policies addressing gender bias and regional discrimination. The judiciary, through various rulings, has reaffirmed that Article 15 aims to build an inclusive and equitable society. It permits differential treatment only to correct structural inequalities. Thus, while equality before law is a moral concept, under Article 14, Article 15 gives it practical meaning by addressing real social disparities and promoting justice that is both corrective and transformative in nature. Article 16 ensures equal opportunity for all citizens in matters of public employment. It guarantees that appointments and promotion in government services are based on merit without discrimination. However, it also recognizes that certain sections of society, such as scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward classes, require protective measures to achieve real equality. In Nagraj versus Union of India 2006, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutional validity of reservations in promotions under Article 16(4), provided they comply with the 50% ceiling and exclude the creamy layer. The court balanced meritocracy with social equality, emphasizing that affirmative action must not erode administrative efficiency. Earlier, Indira Sohani versus Union of India 1992 had clarified that reservations apply only at the entry level, not promotions. Together, these judgments form a coherent policy framework ensuring fair representation while maintaining equality of opportunity. Article 16 thus reinforces the constitutional commitment to a merit based yet socially responsive public service, striving to bridge India's deep rooted social and economic divides. Article 17 abolishes untouchability in all forms and makes its practice a punishable offense. It represents the moral and legal rejection of caste-based discrimination, affirming human dignity and equality. In State of Karnataka versus Appabalu Ingale 1993, the Supreme Court reaffirmed this commitment, emphasizing that untouchability in any manifestation violates the core of the Constitution. The court underscored the need for strict enforcement of protective laws like the Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955 and the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. These legislative measures operationalize Article 17 by criminalizing social exclusion and promoting integration. The ruling also recognized that psychological and social damage caused by untouchability, declaring its eradication a constitutional obligation. Article 17 is not merely a declaration but a transformative command demanding social reform. It ensures equality in access to temples, public spaces, water sources, and employment. The judiciary's proactive interpretation of Article 17 transforms constitutional morality into social reality, symbolizing India's transition from hierarchical oppression to a right based democracy. Article 19 guarantees essential freedoms speech, expression, assembly, association, movement, residence, and profession. In a state of Madras versus V.G. Rao 1952, the Supreme Court held that freedom of speech includes the right to criticize government actions, though subject to reasonable restrictions for public order and morality. The judgment emphasized that freedom of expression is vital for democracy, Later, in S.R. Bommai versus Union of India, 1994, the court discussed freedom of association, holding that political parties have a right to form, function, or dissolve under Article 19(1)(c). The court recognized that ideological freedom is essential to political democracy. In TMA Pai Foundation versus State of Karnataka 2002, it was ruled that private educational institutions enjoy admissions for equality and equity. Article 19 thus strikes a balance between liberty and responsibility. It protects individual freedoms while allowing reasonable restrictions to safeguard sovereignty, morality, and public order, reflecting the maturity and adaptability of constitutional democracy. Article 21 guarantees that no person shall be deprived of life or personal liberty except according to procedure established by law. In A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras, 1950, the Supreme Court gave a narrow interpretation, holding that liberty was limited to freedom from physical restraint. However, this rigid view evolved significantly over time. The court later recognized that the right to life encompasses more than mere animal existence. It includes living with dignity, privacy, and environmental safety. The transformative interpretation came with Menka Gandhi versus Union of India, 1978, where the court held that any law depriving liberty must be just, fair, and reasonable. The judgment integrated Articles 14, 19, and 21, establishing that due process is a constitutional requirement. In MC Mehta versus State of Tamil Nadu, 1996, environmental rights were declared an intrinsic part of life and liberty. The court affirmed that every individual has the right to a clean environment free from industrial hazards. These decisions expanded the scope of Article 21 to include various facets like livelihood from Olga Talis versus State of Maharashtra case, right to health, shelter, and human dignity, or quality life with Francis Coralai case. The right to life thus became the foundation of modern constitutional jurisprudence, ensuring that the state cannot act arbitrarily against individual liberty. And at the same time, this is high time. The state should move out of this narrow definition of right to life as being mere physical freedom from death and detention. The dynamic interpretation of Article 21 represents India's progressive human rights jurisprudence. Minka Gandhi versus Union of India 1978 established that procedure under Article 21 must satisfy the test of reasonableness and non arbitrariness. The case also highlighted that the right to travel abroad and personal reputation are components of liberty. Later, cases built upon this principle to include privacy, health, and livelihood as essential aspects of life. MC Mehta versus State of Tamil Nadu reaffirmed that a pollution free environment is integral to life. This expansion led to recognition of the right to clean air, safe water, and sustainable ecology. Similarly, Cause versus Union of India 2017 introduced the right to die with dignity under Article 21, allowing passive euthanasia uh, under strict conditions. These interpretations demonstrate the judiciary's role in adopting constitutional principles to challenge the existing social realities and also to change the existing social realities. The right to life now symbolizes a guarantee of quality living, ensuring that individuals are protected from both state excesses and social injustices. By including dignity, privacy, and environmental balance, Article 21 has become the most celebrated and evolving guarantee of human rights in India. 86th Constitutional Amendment Act inserted Article 21A, making education a fundamental right for children aged 6 to 14. The transformation was grounded in the Supreme Court's interpretation in Unikrishnan versus State of Andhra Pradesh, 1993, which recognized education as essential for realizing other rights. The court held that the state must provide free and compulsory education to ensure social and economic empowerment. It also highlighted that illiteracy undermines equality and liberty. The Unikrishnan judgment linked education to human dignity, observing that no child should be denied access to schooling because of poverty. Later, the Right to Education Act 2009 operationalized this mandate, setting norms for quality and accessibility. Article 21A thus combines the moral duty of the state with an enforceable right of the citizen. Education became a means to bridge class, caste, and gender divides. The Supreme Court emphasized that education is both an instrument of social change and a condition for exercising other rights like freedom and equality. This integration of educational access within the framework of life and liberty strengthened India's constitutional democracy by ensuring inclusion and opportunity for every child. Articles 25 to 28 guarantee freedom of conscience and religion, reflecting India's secular fabric. In the Shirur Mutt case, 1954, the Supreme Court interpreted Article 26, recognizing the autonomy of religious denominations to manage their internal affairs. The court drew a distinction between essential religious practices, which are constitutionally protected, and secular activities, which can be regulated by the state. This principle preserved the delicate balance between freedom and regulation. In Sri Venkatramana Devaru versus State of Mysore, 1958, the court examined the interplay between religious freedom and social reform, emphasizing that public order, morality, and health can limit religious practice. The court held that religion cannot override constitutional morality. Sardar Saidna Tahir Saifuddin Sahib versus State of Bombay 1962 reaffirmed the right of religious denominations to manage their affairs but accepted reasonable restrictions for social welfare. These rulings established that secularism in India does not imply irreligion or being irreligious, but equal respect for all faiths. Article 25 to 28 collectively safeguard both individual and group religious rights while ensuring harmony with social progress and constitutional supremacy. The freedom of religion under Article 25 to 28 represents a synthesis between individual liberty and social welfare. The Supreme Court in Shirur Mutt case 1954 clarified that the state cannot interfere in matters purely religious but may regulate economic, social, or secular aspects associated with religion. Shri Venkatramana Devaru versus State of Mysore 1958 addressed temple entry restrictions, ruling that religious freedom is subject to social reform and equality principles. The Sardar Saidana Tahir Safuddin Sahib case 1962 upheld the autonomy of religious leaders while stressing conformity with public order and morality. Together, these cases form the backbone of India's religious liberty doctrine, blending freedom of faith with constitutional ethics. They established that the state is neutral but not indifferent to religion. It intervenes when practices violate human dignity or equality. Thus, Indian secularism means principled distance rather than total separation. Article 25 to 28 stand as pillars of harmony, allowing every citizen to follow their conscience while ensuring that religion remains within the bounds of public interest and constitutional values. Article 31, as originally framed, protected the right to property but allowed the state to acquire land for public purposes through legal authority. In Keshwanand Bharti versus State of Kerala, 1973, the Supreme Court discussed the limits of this power. While upholding Parliament's authority to amend the Constitution, the court ruled that the basic structure, including equality and rule of law, cannot be destroyed. The judgment also clarified that the right to property is not absolute and may be reasonably restricted. Subsequent amendments diluted Article 31, and in 78, the 44th and in 1978, the 44th Amendment removed it from the list of fundamental rights, replacing it with Article 300A under Part 12. Nonetheless, Keshwanand Bharti remains significant because it tied property rights to constitutional balance, ensuring social justice without compromising fairness. The court stated that economic redistribution must respect legal principles. This interpretation helped harmonize socialist objectives with individual rights. Property, once a symbol of privilege, thus became an instrument for achieving equality and welfare under the rule of law, consistent with democratic and constitutional values. Article 32, called the Heart and Soul of the Constitution by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, empowers individuals to approach the Supreme Court directly for the enforcement of fundamental rights. In Rameshwar Prasad versus Union of India, 2006, the court reaffirmed that Article 32 itself is a fundamental right. It acts as a safeguard, ensuring that all other rights are meaningful and enforceable. The Supreme Court observed that without an effective remedy, the guarantee of rights becomes hollow. In ADM Jabalpur versus Shiv Kant Shukla, 1976, case also known as the habeas corpus case, the court faced the issue of suspension of rights during the emergency. Initially, the court ruled that rights could be curtailed under certain conditions. However, this decision was later criticized and overruled in subsequent judgments that restored the supremacy of individual liberty. The court clarified that Article 32 remedies cannot be suspended uh, even in emergencies. This evolution highlighted the judiciary's central role in defending constitutional freedoms. Through judicial review and public interest litigation, Article 32 became a living instrument for justice, ensuring that power remains accountable and fundamental rights remain inviolable. It embodies the democratic spirit of access to justice for all citizens. Article 226 of the Constitution empowers high courts to issue writs for protection of fundamental rights and other legal rights. Though Article 32 directly relates to the Supreme Court, Article 226 gives high court concurrent jurisdiction, expanding the scope of judicial protection. The Supreme Court in D.K. Basu versus State of West Bengal in 1997 emphasized the role of high courts in safeguarding rights, particularly against custodial violence and abuse of power. The judgment laid down specific guidelines to prevent torture and unlawful detention, highlighting the importance of humane treatment under Article 21. High courts under Article 226 act as sentinels of liberty in their respective states. They provide citizens with accessible remedies without requiring them to approach the Supreme Court directly. The dual structure of remedies under Articles 32 and 226 ensures that constitutional justice is decentralized and available to all. The court recognized that the rule of law depends on vigilant judicial supervision. Article 226 thus broadens the democratic framework, guaranteeing timely protection of rights and maintaining a continuous check on arbitrary or unconstitutional actions by state authorities. The principles of equality, liberty, and justice under Article 14, 15, and 21 have evolved through judicial creativity. In Navteej Singh Johar versus Union of India 2018, the Supreme Court decriminalized consensual same sex relations by striking down parts of Section 377 of the IPC. The court held that privacy, dignity, and equality are inseparable elements of constitutional morality. The ruling reinforced that discrimination based on sexual orientation violates Article 14 and 15. Similarly, Common Cause versus Union of India 2017 recognized the right to die with dignity as part of Article 21, permitting passive euthanasia under medical and judicial supervision. These decisions marked a shift towards recognizing individual autonomy and personal choice as central to human liberty. The judiciary's proactive interpretation extended fundamental rights to modern contexts like privacy, digital freedom, and bodily autonomy. Each case demonstrates that constitutional guarantees must adapt to changing values of society. Through these landmark rulings, the Supreme Court strengthened the transformative nature of the Constitution, ensuring that equality, liberty, and dignity remain not just abstract ideals but enforceable realities in everyday life. The Supreme Court has consistently maintained that fundamental rights are not absolute, they must coexist with reasonable restrictions to preserve social harmony and state security. The test of reasonableness developed under Articles 14, 19, and 21 ensures that any limitation imposed by law must serve a legitimate public purpose. In the state of Madras versus VG Raw 1952, the court held that restrictions must be proportionate and necessary. This doctrine now guides all constitutional adjudication in environmental cases like MC Mehta versus State of Tamil Nadu 1996. The court balanced industrial growth with ecological sustainability. Similarly, in cases having reservation policies and affirmative action, such as Indra Sawhney versus M. Nagraj, the court reaffirmed that equality and social justice are complementary. The judiciary thus functions as the guardian of equilibrium also, protecting individual freedoms from while recognizing the state's duty to ensure welfare. This balance defines Indian democracy, where rights and duties reinforce one another. By harmonizing liberty with collective good, the court preserves both personal dignity and social stability, embodying the spirit of constitutional governance. The evolution of fundamental rights in India illustrates the pivotal role of the judiciary in giving a life to constitutional ideals. From Keshwanand Bharti and Menka Gandhi to Navtej Johar and Common Cause, the Supreme Court has expanded the meaning of liberty, equality, and dignity beyond their textual limits. Judicial interpretation transformed the Constitution into a living document responsive to contemporary challenges. The integration of environmental rights, education, privacy, and gender justice reflects the Constitution's adaptability. Fundamental rights now embody the values of inclusivity, accountability, and human development. The courts have ensured that governance operates within the boundaries of justice and morality. These judicial precedents collectively reinforce that democracy is sustained not by power but by the protection of individual rights. The Constitution thus serves as a moral compass guiding both citizens and the state. Through its evolving interpretation, the judiciary has upheld the idea that freedom and equality are the soul of India's republic, ensuring that every person enjoys the full promise of justice and constitutional dignity. Thank you.